Welcome to the podcast, Curt and Andrew.
Thank you.
Hello,
Yeah.
having
Nice.
us.
Okay, let's kick it off by doing some short introductions. Curt, why don't I start with you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm the founder and the CTO for Fintech Islands. My background is predominantly in the tech space, but more in the enterprise level type applications. I got involved in Fintech Islands just as a part of a broader mission to kind of um, give back to my community, to my region, which is the Caribbean region. And the story of how that was founded, we'll get into later, but I met up with a few great people along the way, and they've helped me to put that vision together. So now we're on this journey for Fintech Islands.
All right. And Andrew, what's your background?
Yes. So hi, Peter. So I've been involved in fintech in different ways for 25 years or so. And the last little more than a decade has been in producing events like the one that we're doing with Curt. Um, I was a management consultant in the payments industry. I was an executive at a bank and helped build a digital banking platform years ago. And I attended the first edition of the Money 2020 conference. And be careful when you go to conferences because you might end up working for them, because that's what happened to me. I spoke at the conference the next year and met the founders and became the first head of content, the chief content officer at Money 2020. And sort of through that journey of helping to build that event, you sort of fell in love with the whole process, the creativity of building an event, the impact you can have on the industry and the community, and being able to look at a really big picture of things that are happening rather than necessarily being a deep expert in only one thing. You could look across the landscape, and I enjoyed that aspect as well.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed. So, anyway, let's get to the sort of the founding story of Fintech Islands. Curt, you touched on it already, but maybe you could just kind of tease out why you decided to start this event and what was the thinking there?
Yeah, I mean, the impetus for this was really around the desire to contribute and to give back to the communities that, we're from. And I'm from the Caribbean region. I'm from Barbados. And, there's a level of frustration that goes into that where as we go back to the islands, as we go back to our home town, we see the somewhat lack of progress in certain spaces, specifically around technology, around financial technology, around banking, the way that things are transacted in the Caribbean are a few years, if not maybe even a decade behind North America and some other developing countries. And being in the tech space, I work in North America. I became a little bit frustrated with the fact that we were so far behind. So I had this idea of, hey, what is the best way to influence innovation? What is the best way to influence impact within our home region? And the idea of bringing people that were experts, thought leaders, people that were innovating from around the world, and bringing them into the area that you're trying to impact, and having them contribute or share their stories may become a catalyst for that movement. And Allison, who's the co-founder, who unfortunately is not able to make it today, she's been a longtime friend of mine, and she lives in Miami with me. I reached out to her and said, "Hey, do you mind? Let's grab coffee a day." So we hooked up for over coffee, and I shared my idea to her. Now she is in the production space. She's in the events planning, massive productions, 20,000 type people events, and she fell in love with it. So partnering with her and a few other folks that came along later, we kind of developed the idea of the conference, developing the Fintech Island conference. And it was really about two specific goals when we first talked about it in terms of the vision, was really bringing the community of disruptive people to the island, leaders and people that are redefining technology in the financial space, and then try to make it serve as a catalyst for building a more inclusive and efficient financial and technology sector within the region. So those were kind of like the two main goals when we started. And then it's since then, you know, expanded, and it has a life of its own, and it's kind of growing. The community is growing, and the direction that we're taking it is also dynamic, and it's also growing. So, you know, we're looking to see what happens this year, and how we evolve the conference and what we're trying to do.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so then, Andrew, how did you first get involved here?
Yeah.
Because you're not from Barbados.
No.
He's an
Maybe
honorary Barbadian.
I'm working on my honorary membership to Barbados. So it was actually interesting. One of my colleagues from Money 2020, her name's Usha James, is originally from Trinidad, and she's a brilliant event operations leader, and had already met Allison and Curt and was beginning to help them, you know, put together their vision for Fintech Islands. And she introduced us. She suggested that you know, with my background, I could be helpful to them. And I'm so happy that happened, because, you know, it's before, not only am I not from Barbados, Peter, I had never been to the Caribbean on a vacation before I started working on this project, right? So it was this wonderful opportunity to learn about the culture of the place, to learn the nuances, you know, not, you know, if you're not familiar with the region, you'd start to think that, well, all Caribbean islands are the same. No, they're not, right? Every island has its unique culture, its unique, you know, there's 3 different languages, there's 45 million people, and there's a great amount of diversity across the region. And you start to understand that and see the talent that's there and the opportunity there is for fintech. And so I was very attracted to it. And then with the Rolodex that I have from, you know, years of being in the industry and the experience of putting together content for events, I knew that I could be helpful, right, to grow the event. So that I got connected through a mutual friend and helped launch the event last year. And this is our second edition coming up. And as Curt's saying, it's hosting a truly global conference in the region, and that's the way that it can be a catalyst for the fintech ecosystem there.
Right. Yes. Well, I think that personally, from my perspective, I've actually never been to the Caribbean either, but I feel like I know it well because I'm Australian, and we have the game of cricket that the West Indies, when I was growing up, and I was growing up in the 80s in Australia, the West Indies were the greatest cricket nation on the planet. And so I got exposed to a lot of the Caribbean there, and not quite as good as they used to be, but when you had the likes of Vivian Richards and Clive Lloyd and those characters back in the 80s, it was a lot of fun to watch. But anyway, I digress. Why should Americans, because this is obviously, I've got a primary American audience for this podcast. Why should Americans care? We're going to talk about the event in a little bit, but I want to talk about the Caribbean first. Why should Americans care about this from a fintech perspective, this region?
So Curt, I can take a stab at that, and then please add your perspective. So one is it's a larger market than you realize. Now, I threw out the 45 million people. That's the population of the whole region. And that's larger than Canada, which is 30-some thousand people. It's about the size of Spain, right? So it's many different smaller island nations, a lot of diversity there. To scale a business, there's some complexity of doing that, but it's a big part of the world. So that's one thing. The other is that there's still a lot of cash in the Caribbean, and there's a lot of opportunity to digitally transform and make things more efficient and more inclusive, and to help small businesses and to help consumers. And so there's opportunity there. There's tremendous talent in the region, and there are governments and regulators that have some, you know, that care and are trying to think of ways to balance protecting consumers with innovation. And, you know, how can we do that? And it's not easy to do. but there's experimentation and there's a willingness to try new things. And so I think it becomes an exciting place to things like central bank digital currencies that some of the early experiments with that idea have been in the Caribbean, and there's maybe a little less barriers to try new things there, and so I think it makes it attractive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And just to add on top of what Andrew mentioned, yeah, it's one of the most untapped region if you look at all the spaces that people are expanding in terms of technology and innovation and fintech in specifically. The other thing is that with the global economy, the boundaries and the borders are less, they're more ambiguous, right? It's pretty much non-existent. So tapping into another potential 45 million market is just a huge opportunity for a lot of companies in North America, Europe, Africa. We have interests all around. So that is just a huge opportunity in terms of the size of the Caribbean region as a whole. And then the other thing is that there's a huge diaspora in North America, the UK, Europe, Africa. And they play such a pivotal role. The amount of transactions and the dollars that are flowing back into the region, back and forth into the region, is tremendous. And just tapping into that and figuring out how you could, make opportunities or create opportunities from that is another area that I think is not looked at enough, and is a potential for a huge upside for any business or any company trying to go into the Caribbean region.
Right. The diaspora is a really interesting point. There's U.S. cities like New York, in even Toronto in Canada, Miami, of course, because of proximity, but also Atlanta, where I'm based. That one of our speakers at the event is the Chief Financial Officer of TIAA, right? Reports to Sunda Duckett, this rock star CEO, huge job. He's from Barbados, and he's coming back to speak and to be a part of our event, Dave Dowridge. And so you see a lot of influence of the diaspora globally, and how that can, and then with the tourism in the region, so many global connections that pass through that part of the world, and it's just an amazing melting pot for kind of global commerce, if you will.
All right.
Yeah.
So one more question before we get into the details of the event. I'm like, what's sort of the state of fintech in the Caribbean right now? What are the important trends that people should be aware of when it comes to Caribbean tech?
So one thing that I'm seeing is, we put together the content for the event, is some of the traditional players, the incumbent banks and larger players, are working to digitally transform the way they do business. And they're doing it by, in some cases, by being supportive of fintech startups, which is interesting. The sponsor of our startup pitch is a bank, Republic Bank. They're doing it by partnering with companies like systems integrators like IBM, bank as a service, embedded banking providers like Mbank, another company called InfoCorp. So you're seeing these global providers that are involved in banking as a service and open finance, beginning to partner and engage with Caribbean financial institutions to help them digitize the way they do business. So that's one thing that's interesting. The other is starting to see some startups get some traction, right? There's a really interesting company called First Atlantic Commerce that processes e-commerce payments all across the region that's doing very well. There are a number of mobile wallet providers that are beginning to, doing some interesting things. And so it's still early days, which is why this event exists, to be that catalyst and to propel the region. But there are signs of that the region's receptive and ready to kind of proceed with this fintech revolution in the Caribbean.
Yeah. So we're seeing, as Andrew mentioned, there's a lot of payment wallets that are coming up in the region. So I think cashless is a big thing. There's a lot of kind of like small business, micro type business transactions that happen that are predominantly in the region, very cash centric. And there's a lot of push to kind of move those to a digital form, a digital platform, whether it's either payment wallet or direct, B2B transactions with the service provider or banking institution. So we're seeing a lot of that. And then, we're seeing also a lot of, push from the big incumbent banks in terms of financial inclusion and a lot of education, right? Trying to push more into the market towards the young people and educating them in terms of like financial literacy and stuff like that. So a lot of them are adopting and white labeling a lot of products that teach that. So they're embedding those products into their suite of applications or into their banking profile or portfolio of applications. So we're seeing that. So we're seeing really, really positive signs and really good traction. Things that 5 years ago you would have never seen. I think when we first kicked off this event, we started it back in 2021, preparing for our launch in 2022. There was a lot of skepticism from some of the major players in terms of where this would go and whether there was a real true need for this type of digitization and innovation in this space. But we're happy to say in such a short space between 2021 and now, we're seeing a lot of adoption and a lot of support from the big players in the industry. So very, very positive.
The other thing I would just say is the central banks and regulator, the innovation that happens there with regulatory sandboxes and central bank digital currencies, that I think that's good for the environment. And there's partnerships with the private sector in some of those initiatives as well, right, to implement. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the event itself. Maybe you could just give us a little bit of a synopsis about some of the details, where it is, when it is, and what people can expect who are going to be attending.
All right, why don't you give the big picture and I can maybe cover the agenda content.
Yeah, sure. As Andrew mentioned, this is a global event. We're hosting a global event on the beautiful island of Barbados. We have a very comprehensive agenda in terms of bringing thought leaders, innovators, startups, academics to the event to contribute and share their stories and learn and interact. We're really, really embracing the networking and the one-on-one type activities because I think that's where we see a lot of value, especially from the first one that we did. I think that came through very clearly that was one of the most important aspects of it. So we're really leaning into making sure we make the right connections. We put people together. We put the right people in the right room to make those connections, make those deals. So we're really leaning into that. The other major thing that I would say about it is that what we really wanted to do is also showcase the host island, right? We didn't want it to only make it about everyone coming to the conference and being stuck in a presentation type setting. We wanted to make sure we embrace and bring the culture and bring the feel of the host island. So as part of it, we're really leaning into the experience where we share the culture of the host island. We share the culture of Barbados. We share the culture of the people there. And we're intertwining that into the mix of how we network, right? So that is very important. We have a lot of different activities that tap into that and allow people to meet and network in a setting that is not so sterile as a meeting room or a presentation room, but something that's more natural and organic, where we think would be more conducive for better partnerships and better conversations. Yeah, so I think it's what we're trying to do is tremendous, and I think people would get a lot of benefit from attending the conference.
No, I never once saw people exchange LinkedIn profiles on a catamaran when I was working at Money 20. but that does happen at Fintech Islands. And then in terms of the speaker lineup and the content for the event, it's over 3 days. The first day is a bit more content heavy than the second two. There's a lot happening on that first day. A general session that features Peter Renton. You may have heard of him. But Peter, we're excited that you're going to be there and doing an interview with a senior executive from MasterCard, who's one of our major sponsors. But there's some great content in the morning general session, and then we've organized some what we call deep dives that cover different aspects of fintech. There are 9 different topics. I won't rattle them all off, but it's things like artificial intelligence and open finance and digital assets and innovation in banking. So, opportunities and breakout sessions for people to learn about what's happening in different areas of fintech. And there are 140 speakers at the event. About half of them are from the Caribbean and kind of feature the best of the region in fintech, but the rest are from the US, Latin America, Africa, Europe. They're from all over the world. So it's a very global lineup of speakers. Interestingly, more than half of our speakers are the founder or CEO of the organization they represent. So it's a very senior group. And we're really excited about the, bankers and fintechs and investors and policymakers and academics that are a part of that lineup. And, and all the music and culture of the place where you share those experiences with people in the industry means you build relationships. And that's how the event's designed.
Right. And there's maybe you could just tease out that you mentioned the startup area. There's is there a startup competition? What's the
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. So we've selected. We had an application process. We even did some roadshow, smaller events, pitch events around the region during the year, and selected 10 early stage startups that are either a Caribbean founder or they're clearly, tied to the region. And it's a very kind of diverse representation of different islands and different aspects of fintech, but 10 companies, all sort of pre-seed early companies. And someone that I think you and I both know, Matteo Rizzi, who is keynote speaker and advisor and investor, has started a nonprofit called the Time Pledge Network, where investors and founders will donate time to mentor founders in different markets around the world. So we've organized some mentoring sessions for the 10 founders, and all 10 of them will present on the main stage at our event on the final day. The top 3 will win cash prizes, but all of them have this great opportunity to showcase what they're doing as they build their company and receive complimentary passes. And interestingly, there is a program through the United Nations International Trade Center where they also are working to support startups in the region. And so in addition to sponsoring the event, UN International Trade Center had another cohort of startups that they're hosting to attend the event. And so through their program and through ours, we're giving a lot of support to those young entrepreneurs.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so the people like beyond the event, how can people engage? How can people stay engaged with Fintech Islands if they can't make it this in January? How do they stay engaged?
Yeah, so they can sign up for our newsletter if they go to fintechislands.com and just sign up for our newsletter. So we have that goes out regularly, keeping us abreast of what we're working on, the topics that are very relevant to the space and the industry, and then what's happening with the next planning for our next event. So that would be kind of the best way. And then also engage with us via our social platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, and on Facebook. We're very, very engaged on those platforms, and whenever anyone reaches out, we engage with them and we connect with them. So that would be kind of like the best places for people to stay abreast of what we're doing and what's happening in our space, and also engage with our team.
Right, right. And I will obviously link to those in the show notes. Okay. Final thoughts on the event on Caribbean FinTech before we close?
Well, I know that that would be a quick turnaround by the time people are listening to this podcast, but it's something to consider to look at purchasing a pass and joining us this year. This event is really unique for those of us that attend a lot of conferences that are in places like New York and Las Vegas and, et cetera. And it's not just because of the beauty of the place, although it's a wonderful, beautiful island, Barbados, but there's a real authenticity to this community and, very mission-driven group of people that want to make a difference in this part of the world. And there's also opportunities to connect with people that are not from the region, right? So I have folks that I invited from North America and Europe who attended last year and made connections, globally at the event. So, but we'd love to have anyone join us, and then if not this year, to engage, as Curt described, for future events.
Okay, well, I personally am really very much looking forward to my first trip to the Caribbean, and really looking forward to the whole event. So, Andrew, Curt, thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having us, Peter.
Okay.
Yeah, Peter, thanks so much for having us, and we look forward to seeing you at Fintech Islands here soon.